Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Roger Johnson and Nina Warhurst.
Good morning. Our headlines today. Tougher coronavirus restrictions are imposed on Bolton, which now has the highest infection rates in England.
Warning to the EU. The UK's chief Brexit negotiator says the government's prepared to walk away with no deal.
Good morning. England just managed to beat Iceland. Raheem Sterling scoring a penalty late on to kick off their Nations League campaign with a win.
On the whole, the weather's not looking too bad for most of us today. Some scattered clouds, a few showers and some sunny spells too.
Hello, good morning. It's Sunday, September the 6th. Our top story today. Tougher coronavirus measures are being imposed in Bolton in Greater Manchester because of a rising number of cases.
The infection rate is now the highest in England. The increase is being driven by a spike among younger people. Our reporter Simon Jones has this report.
Everyone in Bolton must play their part. That's the plea from the local council as tighter restrictions are introduced. The infection rate has risen to 99 cases per 100,000 people per week, the highest in England, with people aged between 18 and 49 accounting for 90% of cases. Residents are now being told to only use public transport for essential purposes and not to mix with other households in any setting, indoors and outdoors, unless part of a support bubble. Although some restrictions are being lifted elsewhere, a ban on people from different households meeting indoors remains in most areas of Greater Manchester.
The evidence suggests that it's still the home and gatherings in the home where we're seeing the most community transmission. Let's be honest, people behave differently in the home. It's not as regulated as a public space, and that's why the restrictions are still there.
The aim is to avoid a more draconian local lockdown like the one seen in Leicester in June. But there is a growing list of coronavirus hotspots. In Leeds, students are about to return to their studies, and officials are worried young people are becoming complacent. Other areas added to Public Health England's watch list are South Tyneside, Corby, Middlesbrough and Kettering. Last week, restrictions on visiting other households were reintroduced in Glasgow. Extra testing is being promised in problem areas, but the think tank, the Health Foundation, is warning that the public don't think official coronavirus guidelines are clear enough, especially about who they can meet and where. Simon Jones, BBC News.
Let's speak with our correspondent Mairead Smith, who's in Bolton. Mairead, a bit of a rollercoaster for residents there. It was only last week restrictions were lifted and then reimposed a few hours later.
That's right, yes. You could be forgiven for being really confused about where you stand in Greater Manchester, but the message is very, very clear. Here in Bolton, you are not to take public transport unless you really need to. You are not allowed to mix with households outside of your support bubble anywhere. So that message is really, really clear. And driving into this area this morning, there were mobile signs asking people to do their bit to avoid a local lockdown. The plea is to please take this seriously, adhering to those really important public health messages that we all heard at the start of this pandemic. Good hand hygiene, social distancing and of course face coverings where they're necessary. And the reaction from the leaders here who've been guiding the people through this pandemic is to take it seriously, to avoid even more increased measures. Now, lots of Greater Manchester on Tuesday will enjoy some freedom of more businesses opening, such as gyms and indoor play areas, casinos as well. But Bolton was excluded from that announcement on Friday because the rate of infections was too high. It's increased again. It's now at 99 new cases per 100,000 of the population. Now, it was well over 100 whenever Leicester was placed into that local lockdown some time ago. Those measures are easing, but here in Bolton the plea is very clear to people who live here. Take it seriously to avoid a local lockdown here.
Mairead Smith in Bolton, many thanks. And Brexit's chief negotiator, Lord Frost, has warned the European Union that the UK isn't scared of not having a trade deal at the end of the transition period.
We're going to talk to our political correspondent Nick Eardley, joins us live this morning from our London newsroom. Morning, Nick. Nice to see you. This is Lord Frost's first interview since the latest round of talks got underway. And are these strong words just part of the negotiating strategy?
Yeah, I think that's probably about right. Morning, guys. Got it here. I mean, you can tell from the headline what he's trying to get the European Union to think, that the UK isn't going to blink this time round. He's a bit critical of the way that it's been negotiated in the past, saying that in the past EU had called the UK's bluff. But some pretty strong language from him saying that the UK is not going to be a client state, that they're not going to be pressured into doing a deal. Remember that although the UK's left the European Union, we're still in that transition period where basically nothing's changed. And the teams have a few weeks left really to try and figure out a trade deal which will figure out how the UK trades with Europe in the past. There's some real sticking points on things like state aid and on fishing, and you know those sticking points have been there for a few weeks now. And I think what Lord Frost is trying to get the European Union to believe is that he's serious on this, and they're not going to compromise on what they see as some of the fundamentals. The European Union side, though, saying we've heard this before, and this is all about muscle flexing ahead of those final rounds of negotiations in the next few weeks.
Yeah, another political story doing the rounds this morning, going back to coronavirus. Labour calling for more testing at airports, not something that's particularly new in itself, but they think this is a way of helping the travel industry.
Yeah, we've spoken so many times over the last few weeks, haven't we, about quarantine and the changing rules over who has to self-isolate when they return from holiday. Labour have written to the Home Secretary this morning saying that they want a rapid review into those rules, saying that they're unclear and they're creating uncertainty. As you say, it's kind of been said for a while now, and I think, you know, part of the problem with this demand is they're not really coming up with a plan. They're saying that testing should be one of the options. There are many Tory MPs who've gone a lot further than that, though, and are putting a lot of pressure on Boris Johnson to come up with that testing regime at airports. Ministers aren't convinced yet, saying they're not totally sure it will work, but it's certainly one of the things that's on the table.
Nick, thanks very much indeed. We're going to stay with coronavirus. Obviously, it's not just an issue here, as we well know. A strict lockdown in Melbourne in Australia is being extended by a fortnight as the city battles a spike in COVID-19 infections.
The authorities have said the restrictions will be eased in the months ahead if rates of new cases continue to fall. Let's speak with our correspondent Phil Mercer, who's in Sydney. Morning, Phil. Disappointing news for residents who were hoping to enjoy freedoms again.
Spring has started here in Australia, but certainly the people of Melbourne, 5 million people, will be pretty disappointed that the lockdown is to be extended. I don't think people will be surprised. The authorities in Australia's second most populous state say that the number of new daily COVID-19 infections will have to fall significantly for the lockdown to end. The state government has drawn up a roadmap to that end, but as it stands, the current lockdown in the city of Melbourne is due to expire on the 28th of September. There will be some easing of Australia's toughest coronavirus restrictions. A nighttime curfew is going to be made an hour shorter. Playgrounds will reopen and people are allowed outside to do a bit more exercise. But for millions of Australians in Australia's second largest city, it must feel that they are in protective custody at home, because this lockdown began in Melbourne in July. It's now snaking towards the end of September, and the government is saying that compliance is the only way that the city will see the restrictions lifted. On Saturday, we saw dozens of arrests at anti-lockdown protests across the country. So the Australian authorities are urging people to do the right thing as they continue to battle this spike in cases in the state of Victoria.
Phil Mercer in Sydney, many thanks.
From serious matters to something a little more lighthearted. If you're feeling a little sluggish this morning, you could be excused at this time in the morning, it has to be said. Here's a way to make you feel a little more alert. It's an Austrian athlete called Joseph Kerbel. He set a new world record for standing in a box of ice cubes.
Yeah, he kept his cool for 2 hours, 30 minutes and 57 seconds, beating his own record by half an hour. Oh, why though? Why? He wore only a pair of swimming trunks, but said his positive thoughts kept him warm. Oh, that expression on his face. I mean, at least he looks like he's having a lovely time.
Yes, no doubt he felt considerably colder when he came out. Incredible performance.
Oh,
well done.
wow.
Yeah, rather him than me.
Absolutely. You're watching BBC Breakfast. It's just gone 6:10. Now, a hospital in Jerusalem is carrying out a programme which it says is a world first in supporting COVID-19 patients.
Yeah, those who've recovered from the virus are volunteering to access the wards and help those who are currently being treated. Our Middle East correspondent Tom Bateman sent this report.
In the sealed world of a coronavirus ward, the sick fill bed upon bed and fight illness alone. Shuki knows how the isolation feels. He had the disease in April. Now recovered, he's one of a small army volunteering to help those suffering now.
We looked at this together, my wife and I, and we said, that's what we've been waiting for, I guess, and it's just it's a chance to give something back.
Hadassah Hospital started the trial last month, thought to be one of the first of its kind in the world. The volunteers are all survivors of the disease, now reassuring current patients, feeding them or helping them call relatives. For under-pressure nurses, it's been vital support.
All the patients are very lonely. They have nobody inside, no family, no friends, no one. Only the staff, and the staff are dressed like aliens. So it's very important for them that someone can come, sit near to them and talk to them.
And there was this one person who I walked into the room and said, hello, how are you? I told him I'm a volunteer, my name's Shuki, I'm a volunteer. And I said, how are you feeling today? And he basically looked up and he said, how am I feeling? And he burst out crying, and for about 10 minutes he was just in tears describing frustration, not knowing what's going to be.
They have about 30 volunteers who are accessing the wards. They've all been tested to ensure they have the antibodies triggered by the virus. They've also donated blood in case that can help others. But the science is still unclear about just how much or even how long people may have immunity from having had the virus, and that is why all the volunteers here wear exactly the same protective gear as the nurses.
Shuki says he knows the risks, but feels safe enough. He hopes the project can help others overcome the desperate isolation coronavirus can bring.
My assumption is that I'm geared up just like any other staff member. And then I have another layer of protection, these antibodies. So I'm saying worst case, I'm like anyone else that goes in. Try to keep it simple and do whatever I can.
Tom Bateman, BBC News, Jerusalem.
13 minutes past 6 now. Shall we have a look at the Sunday morning papers, see what they're all saying on this Sunday morning? The Sunday Telegraph makes an apology, says they're sorry their paper is thinner this morning after climate change protesters blockaded their printing works on Friday night. The paper adds that the organisation behind the protest, Extinction Rebellion, could be treated as an organised crime group in the future.
The Mail on Sunday has an exclusive interview with the Prime Minister's chief negotiator, Lord Frost, which he says the UK will not blink in Brexit negotiations.
The Observer reports on a leaked Public Health England document which suggests that COVID-19 could be endemic in parts of the UK, with a combination of severe deprivation, poor housing and large minority ethnic communities.
And the most watched on the BBC News online site this morning is the story about a team of Japanese scientists who've discovered a strain of bacteria which has managed to survive for 3 years after it was attached to the outside of the International Space Station. Well,
one of the stories we're going to be talking about during the course of the programme this morning is the drive to get people back into offices, which is something the government is quite keen to promote, particularly with regard to civil servants. The Canary Islands, though, could have the solution for people who are able to continue working at home. They've launched a campaign to try and get people to log on and chill out and go to the Canaries, because they're saying the internet connection there will be good enough. And if you're able to work remotely, why not work remotely with a bit of winter sunshine?
Well, yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? If you can exclusively work from home, then, yeah, why not do it somewhere lovely? Although the government would argue, the government report from last week argues that we miss out on a lot, that kind of cross-pollination of ideas and creativity, and we'll be talking to Bob Kerslake, former head of the civil service, about that a little bit later.
You learn as well, isn't it? Start of your career, you learn from people that you work in the office with.
Yeah.
They pick you up on things you do wrong and Happened a lot in my case.
But then writing your headlines from buy a pool, Roger, would be nice,
That'd be
wouldn't it?
good, wouldn't it?
Have you ever bought anything for Mrs Johnson that she's not appreciated?
I have, but we'd better leave it there and move on. I bought her a bread maker once, actually.
Made any bread with it?
Yeah, we have.
Oh.
But, yeah, this is the second incarnation. The first incarnation was so unappreciated it was taken back.
Oh, OK.
Long
You
time
look
ago.
contrite about that, and rightly so. You got it wrong.
Hopefully she's still asleep.
So have a look at this. A husband told by his wife to buy a no maybe for the garden has had her screaming in fear after he bought a 16-stone T-Rex. Adrian Shaw, aged 52, spent 1,600 quid on the model, which is 11 foot tall, plus 500 quid to winch it into position. He said, I thought nothing could look nicer than a replica of a rampaging T-Rex. It came from a company in Wales. I hired a crane to lift it. The neighbours love it. His wife less so, though.
Not surprised. Just one final one. This is a picture story, really. It's got the headline, it's in The Sun on Sunday. Red hot silly peppers. Some of the faces that you see in your peppers when you slice them open in the kitchen. Like something off Halloween, really, isn't it?
Oh, that's me on the left this morning when my alarm went off.
A big yawn.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.